Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another how to draw video. This is another one of my Chibi paper craft videos. You don't have to do it as a paper craft project. You can just do it as a drawing if you want. But I'll be teaching it as a paper craft for those of you who want to follow along. Now people like to know the size I'm working at. That's why I've put these boxes here in place. They are 2 inches on all sides, so 4 inches top to bottom. This is where we're going to be drawing this figure. But I did want to pull back and show you how much space you need underneath. This is about 3 inches, and for those of you using centimeters, the 2 inches comes out to 5 centimeters, and 3 inches is equivalent to around 7.5. But this space here, it doesn't need to be exact. Just want you to understand that you need extra space down here for stuff that we're going to be doing later on. For now, though, I want to zoom in so that we can get into the details of the figure. So the concept of this Chibi project is to show a very frustrated Chibi character, and naturally enough, he's frustrated because he's trying to draw something and it's not working out. So let's begin by drawing a basic guideline here for the head. So this is going to be the lower part of the jaw, just a sort of a gentle curve here, and for placement, notice that it just barely crosses this center line right here, and as you can see, it's on a bit of an angle. He's going to be sort of leaning over, like overcome with frustration is causing him to tilt a little bit in terms of his body. So I guess the next thing I should do is go ahead and put in some lines for the hair. So this is the upper contour of the hair here. I decided to add a bit of a spike coming off the top. You can, of course, do any hairstyle you want for this character, but I'm going to add just a couple of more guidelines down here to finish off the basic structure. So you can see I've started refining things into separate strands of hair. Again, no need to follow along exactly with this. You can kind of come up with your own hairstyle. But now let's go ahead and move on to the fun part, which is to draw these eyes. He's so frustrated that his eyes are squinted shut. They're going to look like giant letter V's kind of pointed toward one another. So this is kind of interesting to me. I've seen some, people drawing chibis. It's not like you're drawing eyes even. It's like you're drawing symbols of eyes, and they will even go so far as to sort of square them off a little so that, they look like these big, bold lines. And later on, of course, I'll be darkening them in quite a bit. But now it's time to draw the shape of the mouth with his teeth gritted in frustration. So you can see I also went ahead and added the ears here, but I did want to point out the unusual shape of the mouth here, sort of a little bit turned in 3/4, and notice how the lower lip actually extends beyond the contour of the jaw, a kind of interesting, optical illusion. Is that the right word? It's totally impossible. How could the teeth come down past the... But I love that. That's the spirit of Chibi. You're not going for anatomical realism or even anatomical possibilities. They're playing around, and that's part of what makes it so fun. I'm going to draw the clenched fists. He's sort of clenching his fists, raising them up in frustration, and then also draw the forearms below each fist. So for now, the shape of the fists is more or less an oval, but pay attention to the kind of orientation of, I can go ahead and maybe now and draw a suggestion of the knuckles to help you understand what I'm going to be going for here. Do you see that? So you can sort of see that his hands are clenched in such a way that the fingers are curling over in this direction. And similarly over here, I'll do the same thing, sort of divide this into 3. Classic cartoony hand, 3-fingered hand. And that gets that into place. I suppose the next thing now is to, let's just go ahead and draw the whole rest of the legs down here. Now, it may be a little hard to understand the structure here. It will become clearer, I think, when we add coloring later on, but he's sort of on his knees or sitting with his legs bent at the knees and going out on both sides. And I suppose the last thing, I'll just go ahead and do this, and maybe we can quietly segue into the real-time drawing part of the video. Why not? Sorry, old man time-lapse, we are quietly sending you on your way and moving on to drawing the details. What few details there are, really. You know, Chibi drawings are famous for not really having a whole lot of details. But one of the basic things of this pose is this idea of it tilting, you know, of him tilting off to one side. And that's why you have to maintain that sort of diagonal slant to a lot of these lines coming right from the base. Let's get into some of the fun part of like adding the classic symbol of Chibi anger. Now, I did years ago a video on how to draw an angry Chibi, and I did one of these symbols, although the variation of it that I did that time, I'm pretty sure had 4 different lines. I thought this time I would do the 3-lined version. Those of you who know your manga and Chibi lore, you will know that this symbolizes a bulging vein, like someone so angry that the vein is popping out on their forehead. But over time it has sort of disconnected from the idea of representing anatomy, and it can be anywhere. It could even be floating around outside of the face. I think he definitely needs some eyebrows, so I'm going to go ahead and add in the angry eyebrows. Interestingly, this idea of these squinted shut eyes can be combined with a smile down here to show someone who's extremely happy. So this idea of the 2-letter V's pointing in towards one another is not necessarily limited only to frustration or anger the way that I'm using it here. So you can see this little zigzag. That's another one that I did with my Angry Chibi video years ago. It's a classic little, I believe, Japanese innovation in terms of cartooning to represent the furrowed brow. And I'm going to just, this doesn't have to do with the facial expression, but I'm going to kind of complete the structure of the hair here, a little bit parted to the side. I'd never like the hair in one of these drawings to call too much attention to itself, because I want you to focus on the facial expression. So I'm keeping it to the bare minimum here, but of course there are sort of little weird gaps over here. And one thing that I have in the back of my mind is the idea that I'm going to have to cut this out with probably a hobby knife later on, so I'm trying to keep the contour relatively simple. In fact, you know, I might expand this ear here. I'm sort of cheating a little bit, so as to allow myself to not have to cut around, right? You can imagine the knife trying to get into a tight little spot like that. I can make it easier on myself by just simplifying things right now. And just to complete the effect, although, you know, I'll be going back over this, I'm going to darken in the eyes here. And then you'll be able to get a sense of what that's going to look like later on. I'm not going to draw the nose. Very often in Chibi illustrations there is no nose. It's sort of up to the artist. You could add one if you want. And I'm going to do a little bit of a line for the teeth. I'm going to give him one of those fangs that you sometimes see in manga illustrations. Not just Chibi, but even more detailed manga illustrations. They'll sometimes get that sort of snaggle-toothed little fang over on one side, or both sides. I'm not going to connect that line. I'm going to let it just sort of breathe a little bit. And the rest of it, you know, comes down to like clothing details. And again, I would encourage you to just sort of make it your own. Don't feel like you have to follow along with everything that I'm doing. But what's going to happen down here by way of shading is I'm going to try to show the knees pointing toward us. It's the one part of the illustration that is sort of trying to become three-dimensional, even though, of course, the drawing is very flat. But by coloring, maybe I can sort of suggest that the knees are popping forward a little bit. We'll get to that later on. I'm going to put a couple of lines here for either his shoes or socks, depending on what you want to look at it, the way you want to interpret that line. However shall we interpret this line? The mystery of the interpretable line. And now I think it is time to maybe refocus the camera so as to draw some of these other details of the floor and the drawing that caused him to become so frustrated. So we've moved the camera so that you can see this lower line that I pointed out, and for me that's going to become the sort of lower edge of a somewhat vague area of space, a sort of circle of space that I'm going to create here for the suggestion of the floor. And notice where I'm going to have it come around, all the way around, and you should sort of imagine that we're looking straight down on the floor. You know, later on I'm going to cut him out, I'm going to pop him up, but for now, as you see the floor, it's as if you're looking straight down upon it. And you can see I'm not trying to make a perfect circle here. There's no need for this. It's like an illustration style of just, you don't want to have the floor go on and on in all different directions, and I'm not going to have it slowly fade out. I'm just going to have a sort of a rough circular area where the illustration comes to an end. And over here, I want to draw a piece of paper, basically. In America, the sort of standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper is rectangular, but not in a super rectangular way. Sort of modestly rectangular, I would say. And I'm not, I'm not worrying too much about getting it perfect, but I guess I will pull out my ruler here and try to get the corners of this to be 90-degree angles, at least looking like it at a quick glance. You know what I mean? I'm not going to sit here with a protractor. Is that what that's called? To try to get the 90-degree angle. But this is going to be kind of fun for those of you who like doing these craft projects, because at this point we need to have him, like he was trying to draw something. Let's say he was trying to draw a face. Of course, he's in the land of Chibi, so maybe faces all look like Chibi faces. But I'm drawing this upside down, maybe from his point of view, and it really doesn't matter too carefully about how I do this. Let's say that he was trying to, get some guidelines in here, and we'll get the eyes, and maybe the eyes ended up 2 different sizes, which is, I hear a lot of people come and say, that always happens to me, or the eyes don't match or something. And I guess I could draw in some ears too. And he only got about this far before he looked at the eyes and he was like, it looks terrible. And at this stage, later on, I'm going to come in with a black Prismacolor and sort of scribble it all out, to show his extreme frustration with this not working for him. And it made him so angry, in fact, that he took his beloved... I don't think beloved is the right word. Is it trusty Dixon Ticonderoga? Did I ever come up with a word for the Dixon Ticonderoga? Anyway, he took his pencil, his drawing pencil, and in frustration snapped it in 2. Oh, the desecration, breaking a pencil in half. So this is one side of the pencil, and then over here I will draw the other side. And hopefully all of this will make more sense later on when we add color and so forth, but this will help convey this idea of his extreme frustration. Why is drawing so hard? This guy on YouTube made it look easy. But when I try to do it, it's really hard. I hate him. Anyway... I wanted to show you one last thing that I'm going to do, and this is totally optional, but I think it'll be kind of fun if there's a checkerboard floor underneath this guy. And I'm actually going to use this ruler as a way of making sure that all the lines are the same distance from one another. You can see I did a line on both sides of it, and then I'm going to come over here and... use the measurement of the ruler itself to help me get these lines all not just parallel to one another, but also the same distance from one another, because I want it to look a little bit like one of these tiled floors. And so here's where I do want to try to make sure it is a right angle. I'm looking right here. I am just sort of eyeballing it, though. I suppose I could be a bit more of a perfectionist about it, but I'm not gonna be. I'm just gonna sort of eyeball it. Looks like a 90-degree angle to me. Works for me. Let's do it. Go ahead, draw that line. And so I'm doing, as I did before, line on both sides of the ruler, and that allows me to come up here and sort of repeat too. Now, if you wanted to, this could be your squares. And you could just end it like that. Yeah, there's not even space for me to get the other one here. But me, no. I want to have actually smaller squares, so I'm finding the sort of midway point there. And I'm going to place the ruler. Again, I'm just eyeballing it. You could try to measure it and make it a little more accurate. You could be a more serious artist than me. It doesn't take much, let me tell you. But I'm doing the same thing, and this will help me get these squares to be smaller. And I think you have the basic idea. Let me go ahead and time-lapse the rest of this because it is just me drawing lines with a ruler. Not that exciting, let's be honest. And then I will come back and get into some of the coloring. Alright, so I've basically got all the lines in place that I want to do. Just to sort of show you what lines need to be erased, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. These guidelines that I had used at the very beginning, the two squares, those can go away. And having erased that, I'm going to probably not so much refocus, but shift the focus higher up so that we can begin adding a little bit of color to the hair and to the face. All right, well, as it turned out, I did actually refocus the camera. I can't predict what I'm going to do from 1 minute to the next. What do you people want from me? So this is a touch marker. I've got my usual sort of grab bag supply of markers. And I just wanted to point out that you don't have to have markers to do a project like this. You could just use colored pencil or indeed any coloring tool that you prefer. But I'm going in and adding color throughout the entire illustration at this point. I wanted to point out, though, a little late in the project, if you've already started to follow, my apologies, but this, if you're doing this as a paper craft project, it will be much more successful if you use actual cardstock type of paper. This is called Bristol board I've brought out here, available in pads and also as individual sheets, I suppose, in an art store. If, like I said, you want this to to be able to cut this out with a hobby knife like I'm going to do later on, and then pop him out, the more you can get something that's like poster board or has some firmness to it, the more successful that part of the project will turn out to be. But I suppose that's about all I need to say. This is not so much a video about coloring. I wanted you really to show you how to get those lines in the right place, and later on to show you the rest of this fun little technique in which we try to make him appear a little more 3D. So bear with me. I'm going to kick it all into time-lapse. I'm going to do a lot of this with marker. I'm probably going to also add in colored pencil. I'm going to finish up all of the coloring, and then we're going to come back. Well, I might even, I'll come back and talk a little bit as I do some final line work, probably with ink, I'm guessing. And then finally at the end we'll be cutting it out, popping it out, and then turning it into, as I said, it's a nifty little paper craft project. Alright, well, I'm going to do more shading throughout this whole area of the floor, but I thought I'd stop since we're zoomed in here and you can see things pretty clearly, and I thought it would be a good time to go in and start doing the final line work. Now, I know that I said a moment ago that I was probably going to use ink, but I say a lot of things, people. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to follow through. No, I just gave it a little more thought and figured that black Prismacolor might be just a little more in keeping with the frustration angle, a little rough around the edges, and allows me just to sort of keep things a little bit loose, as I did just there, flying off in one direction. But what I wanted to talk about here was a little bit about my approach to doing the color first and adding the lines last. I know I've mentioned this on previous videos, but not everyone has seen every video I ever did. Very few. Some people have, and I tip my hat to you. But my theory is that if I do the coloring first and put the lines on last, I can sort of decide at the last minute where the really thick lines need to be. And somehow that decision is easier for me to make when the color is already in place. Also, sometimes depending on what coloring tools you're using, if you put the lines down first, like with a black colored pencil, going in next to it with other colored pencils may sort of smear it around and so forth. So in the name of getting a clean line, I very often will hold off and do the line work last. And anyway, I'm going to go ahead and finish doing the line work all in time lapse, and we are going to come back in a moment, and I will be cutting this out with a hobby knife so that we can move on to the really fun part, which is the last bit of the video. I'm going to pop the character out, and I do have one or two little surprises that I want to add at the end. So let's go ahead and finish this up. Alright, well, I feel like I've got most of the coloring done. You can see that I did try to work in a little bit of three-dimensional shading here on the tiles of the floor. Maybe that's why he's having trouble drawing. He's drawing on a tiled floor, and it's messing things up for him. But I thought you would enjoy seeing me do this part real time. I'm going to come down to here to where he was trying to draw the face, and with this black Prismacolor, I am going to just deliberately do this sort of kind of a scribble. I think that's a first in the history of doing these videos, but he got so frustrated he deliberately destroyed his own drawing. Now it's time for me to go ahead and grab my hobby knife. I'm going to shift the focus of the camera so I can show you how I'm going to begin cutting this character out. Alright, so I've got a hobby knife here, and I'm not going to do this all real time, but I thought I'd just show you how I'm going to cut along the edge, trying my best to get really close to the edge of the black line that I made with the Prismacolor. And I'd say the one thing that you have to pay attention to is that when you get down here to the tip of the toe, that's where the cut is going to stop. That is to say, you do not want to cut along here. No, just leave that attached to the paper. And what I'm going to do after I've done all of this, I've cut around the whole contour of the figure, I'm going to come back and score this. I guess I'll show you how I do that as well. And then we can move on to the fun part, the very final part of the video. Alright, so I finished cutting all the way around, right down to the tip of the toe. As I said, don't want to cut across this line. And you can see that he's ready to be popped up at a 90-degree angle. Now I'm going to take a pair of scissors here, and I'm using a metal ruler. It's not absolutely necessary, but I'm just kind of afraid my plastic rulers might get damaged even by a blade of like scissors like this. That's why I've switched to the metal. I'm trying to line it up, and the idea is to score across this line here without actually cutting very deeply into the paper. I'm going to go one more time here. Trying not to press too hard. All you're trying to do is just make it easier to make that fold when the time comes, and the time has indeed come right now. So hang on, I am going to switch to a new location so as to pop this character up and add just one or two final touches. Alright, well, I've moved the project over to this other room. Sorry for the echo. The acoustics are not so great, but because I scored here, I should be able to pull this guy up and put him into place. Now, there is this one last element that I sort of alluded to earlier. I've taken pieces of scrap paper and cut them to right around the same size as the piece of paper that he was working on. And what I'm going to do is crumple them up and sort of turn them into little balls of crumpled paper, showing how many times he has tried to do this drawing, how many times he has failed and crumpled it up and cast it to one side And so yeah, that is going to become a sort of a little 3D element in the project. Hang on, I'm going to do this all in time-lapse. Alright, well there's my video on how to draw a frustrated Chibi character. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope some of you will try following along with it. And if you want to like take a picture of your version and tweet it at me or show it to me by way of Instagram, I've got my links to the Instagram and Twitter and official Facebook at the end of the video. You can copy it down, or indeed there are links in the info box, the description, where you can also find links for the purchase of my books if you would like to support me that way. And if you would, I would be very, very grateful. So let's go ahead and wind down this video. I want to thank you all for watching it. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll be back with another one real soon.